It's been a couple months since I've done an addition to this volume, but I've been going through year by year since I'm a cinephile, since I am a inveterate cinephile, and have been for much of my life, starting with when I was around, well, really starting when I was a little kid, but I'm, for my purposes, with an adult sensibility, or near adult sensibility. It was more when I was 15, 16, 17 that I started really getting into movies. And so I've done this series where I've talked about what my favorite movie is for every year, starting in 1986. That was the year, I think, when I first started really paying attention to movies. And the last movie I covered was the last year that I covered was 1998. I had a video that covered the years 1996 through 1998, and for most of this series, I've covered, I think, 3 years per video. This particular one, since I've gotten to the year 1999, I'm going to just focus for an entire video exclusively on 1999, because 1999 was such a consequential year, cinematically speaking. There were a lot of movies that came out in 1999 that turned out to be just incredibly influential. And I'm not going to say that all of these movies were great. In fact, I would have significant criticisms of them in a lot of ways, but it's very, very interesting that year, or for a lot of these movies, a lot of the movies I'm going to talk about here, and then I'm going to move up. I'm going to work my way up to my favorite movie of 1999. But 1999 was a year where was the year of the corporate depiction of the corporate scene really seemed to reach a zenith. There were movies that were made where the premise was, you have some white collar guy, going through the daily routine and being miserable in his job, feeling that it's meaningless, feeling that he's just going through the motions, or that he's not that he's missing out on what's truly important in life, and that he's just having to deal with a lot of lies, and having to become, having to transform into some phony being that he doesn't want to be, and he rebels against that for favor of some vision of authenticity that goes against the corporate vision. And there are four movies in particular that fit this description, and it's significant. It's significant in some way. I don't know what the significance is that they all came out in 1999. But I mean, it's the final year of the 90s, the final year of the millennium, I guess. Although people will say, well, 2000s also the millennium, because the millennium started with year one, not year zero, right? But really, uh, if you want to talk about the, it was the year before the numbers all changed, before the first number in the year changed uh, from a 1 to a 2. And, you know, there was all kinds of dread. There was all kinds of excitement about it at the time. There was the Y2K hysteria that was going on. That was just part and parcel of it all. And that was informing a lot of what was in, I think, our consciousness at that time. And so you had these movies that if maybe we're not exactly apocalyptic in tone, although some of them were, but they were at least they reflected this sensibility of, we are on the precipice of something, and it's exciting, it's scary. Is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? But when the number changes, it's been one dot since the year 1000, right? And now it's going to the 2, the third millennium, the beginning of the third millennium. So that was in the air, and you had movies that reflected this in the corporate setting, the staid, conformist corporate setting, where the main character, the hero or the anti-hero, was questioning his what he was doing, why he found himself in this particular kind of job, doing these kinds of things that were either banal, meaningless, or possibly immoral and wrong. And the movies that I think of that fit this description are, starting with a comedy, Office Space. This was directed by Mike Judge, the creator of Beavis and Butthead, and a little bit later, King of the Hill, or maybe that was around the same time. But this was, I think, his first live action movie. I might be wrong about that. But this is a movie that's about, again, a guy who's in a corporate setting, and who is unhappy and is wondering what he's doing here, and has this boss that he hates, who's just awful, who's got this really slimy, schmoozy kind of, I'm gonna need you to, that whole thing. I'm gonna need you to work this weekend. Anyway, he has this kind of enlightenment, or maybe it's insanity, or maybe it's both, where he just decides he's just gonna stop. He's gonna stop showing up for work, or he's just gonna come in whenever he feels like it. And he's going to tell the truth about how he really feels, and it turns out that counterintuitively, there's actually helps him because when the you know the corporate when the guys from corporate central, when they come down and start with you're giving you job performance uh, you know like meeting for to talk about what your how you're doing at your job and what you could stand to improve on and stuff. He just tells them flat out, look, I don't really want to be here, and I don't really do very much, and he's just totally honest with them. And instead of them getting offended, they're like, "Whoa, you're a straight shooter. We like you. We need more like you." Um, and then all other kinds of stuff. Uh, all their hilarity ensues. From there, there's also a plot to embezzle money in the like a way of stealing a little, like in the like half cent, like portions of a cent from things, accounts here and there, in a way that it all adds up, uh, where nobody will notice that he and his buddies are contemplating doing, because they're so sick of putting up with the crap that they put up with every day at this job, and then it all comes to a head. Anyway, Office Space, it's a subtle. It has more staying power than you think it would. It's uh, at the time it didn't really seem like a movie that would stay in our consciousness for so long, and yet it has. Uh, Maybe at a lower level than some of the other movies I'm going to be talking about, but it's still a movie that I think is significant, and for a comedy, uh, it's got some profound things to say, I think, about the relationship between work and life and related subjects. Okay, another movie, one that's been hugely influential, that came out in 1999, is The Matrix. Now, I'm going to be honest, I'm not a big fan of The Matrix as a movie. Visual effects are great. Uh, it's a cool idea. The whole notion that reality isn't what we think it is, and everything like that. I think to me, it played as kind of pretentious at the time, and it still does. But and I've got to hand it to I don't think anybody thought at the time that the whole red pill, blue pill thing, that was going to have such a long lasting impact on the culture. That the whole idea of taking the red pill, years later would become this would accrue this cultural meaning that it has now, and that the idea of being blue pilled, the way that people commonly talk about it today, and that it all started with The Matrix. So visually very impressive. Um, the premise is interesting. Uh, I'm not a huge fan for a number of reasons. Um, I think it's all kind of pretentious, and I also think this whole idea of the character of Neo being the savior, if he thinks he's the savior, but then if he doesn't think that he is, then he isn't. There's a little bit of this whole you can make your own reality, postmodern shit that I don't don't like about it. Uh, but hugely influential. Another movie from 1999 that has been hugely influential is but that I also have mixed feelings about. Although I think I'm more positive. I have more positive feeling about this movie than I do about The Matrix. Is American Beauty. Yeah. Watch this movie today in today's cultural environment. With a guy in his 40s lusting after a teenage girl, and stuff like that would never fly today. That would be like that people would just lose their shit over today. And as I said, I think, as I've said in a prior video, maybe in a prior article, or maybe both. I think that the anti-pedo stuff is great, but it's gone too far in some ways, and this is one example of that. I think. Well, I'm not going to go into any more detail about it than that, but I will say that I think the way the way this particular subject is portrayed in the movie is more sane than how it would be received today. I think the way it was received in 1999 is a saner reaction to how it would be received today. That doesn't mean I think it's okay for middle-aged married men to lust after teenage girls. But anyway, another movie about same thing as Office Space and as The Matrix and as this one other movie that you probably have already guessed that I haven't mentioned yet. You have this another situation where a guy's tired of his corporate job, and in this case, he just quits. And he says, "To hell with it." And of course, we can't ever look at Kevin Spacey the same way, but the fact is, he's great. He's great. He was probably still is a great actor, and he was really good in this movie, in this role, and funny, just really, really funny. And there's there's the even little things like the wife is the shrew in this relationship. Like today, that would be like, ooh, that's misogynistic. You can't have that. But it was Annette Bening's character who was much more of a blameworthy, of a less admirable character. Not that either of them was particularly admirable per se, but Kevin Spacey's character was much more likable. And the scene where he throws his plate of spaghetti against the wall and says, "Don't interrupt me, honey." Again, wouldn't play at all today. It would be problematic. But and it's funny because I remember at the time watching this movie and thinking, oh well, they're making it's not like 1999 was free from having shitty politically correct undertones. In this case, that was the neighbor parent who was a conservative, the father of the weird guy that's romancing the daughter, Kevin Spacey's daughter, who turns out to be a closeted homosexual, of course, but he's he's conservative and he's homophobe and all of that. That just seemed to be a paint by numbers kind of portrayal of. Whereas the homosexual couple, the two guys living together, they're like a model couple. So it's definitely PC in some annoying ways, but definitely by today's standards, very very non-woke in some other ways. But again, the same themes with the character stuck in a meaningless corporate job, trying to break out. And then there's Fight Club, and I'm not going to go into any great detail about Fight Club because I think I've talked about it enough elsewhere. It's one of my favorite movies ever. I saw it when it came out and was a huge fan from the beginning, from the get-go. And it was not a big hit. It had a limited theatrical run. It didn't, I think it maybe barely broke even. So it was not the phenomenon that it is today, that it became. It's not the cult classic that it became. Although I do remember that immediately it had fans, that there were people who saw it and gravitated to it and loved it. And once again, the same kind of theme of corporate guy losing his mind, creating a whole different identity for himself, one that's free from all of from the lie that he's forced to live, and the superficial materialistic way, consumerist, emasculated way that he's living as the corporate guy, as in this case the nameless corporate guy. We're never told what his name is. He's just the narrator, the Edward Norton character. Fight Club is my movie of 1999, so I'll just say that it's my favorite movie of the year, and it's one of my favorite movies just in general. Definitely in my top 5. But I want to, so I thought of those 4 movies and thought, wow, this is really quite a year for movies. And then I started looking at other movies that came out in 99, and I was like, wow, this was a hell of a year for movies. Eyes Wide Shut came out in 1999. It was late in 99. It came out around Christmas time, and I thought it was 2000, but it was Christmas of 1999. The Sixth Sense, M. Night Shyamalan's, not his debut. I think he did something before that wasn't very good, but his first, good movie, the first movie that had the M. Night Shyamalan feel to it. It's also a movie that I like a lot. It's not in the echelon that Fight Club is, but Shyamalan has some other movies that I think are in that same echelon, such as The Village, which I've written about and talked about before. A movie called Election, with Reese Witherspoon and Matthew Broderick, directed by Alexander Payne. This is a sort of sleeper movie from that year, but really really good movie, really well made, well acted. Funny, satirical take on high school, and also on self-deception. It was about a series of characters who were all self-deceived in one way or another. that's also a movie that's worth mentioning. Um, Magnolia came out in 1999. Paul Thomas Anderson's follow-up to Boogie Nights. I don't think it was as good as Boogie Nights, but still a really extremely ambitious movie, let's just say, and one that I watched more recently and appreciated maybe more than I did at the time. Others that came out in '99. Blair Witch, the Blair Witch Project came out in 1999. That certainly changed what horror movies that could be, and it was the first movie that really did something with video where the entire movie, you could make a movie that could be a big hit on an extremely small budget where it's all on video, and like this whole lo-fi vibe was just a part of the whole aesthetic, and it helped. It helped to make the movie what it was. And before that, it was very innovative in that sense. Also worth mentioning. uh, the Phantom Menace. I mean, that came out in '99 too. I'm not saying that's a great movie or anything, but as a Star Wars fan, it's a movie that I have to mention. And let me just see. There must be some others. Bowfinger, with Steve Martin and Eddie Murphy. Really funny movie about and it's about Hollywood, about the phoniness of Hollywood, and it satirized things like Scientology. It had things to say about the business of movie making, and this guy who decides to do this movie in this guerrilla format, where he follows this famous actor around and has his own actors come up to him and say weird cryptic things, and it drives him crazy. And he also that's Eddie Murphy in one role, and then Eddie Murphy in another role is his lookalike. Very, very amusing movie. Also, The Minus Man. I've talked about The Minus Man before. This is a low budget movie, but one of the first, one of the earlier movies with Owen Wilson, where he's like a nice serial killer. He's somebody who goes around and finds people who are unhappy and puts them out of their misery. Interesting premise. And there are others. There's lots of other. I'm just scrolling through, looking at the movies that came out that year. There's others that I don't think are worth mentioning here in this video, but it was quite 1999 was quite a year for movies. But my favorite movie of 1999 is Fight Club. That's how I'll end this video.